camera captured her every move in a way that would haunt the family for years to come. In those fleeting seconds when she stepped onto the street, under the soft flicker of the streetlights, she did not know she was already being watched and recorded by an eye that never blinked. Every motion, every glance over her shoulder was preserved as if by some invisible witness that had infiltrated the intimate corners of her life. The family never realized what had happened until it was far too late, and the images were already in the hands of someone who understood the power of what they held. She moved with a cautious elegance that betrayed both confidence and a hidden anxiety, the weight of her purpose pressing down on her like an invisible shroud that only the camera could sense, and the family would come to understand later. The street was quiet, but the silence was not comforting. It was the kind of silence that warned of eyes in the dark, of secrets moving between shadows, and the subtle rustle of leaves under her careful steps sounded like alarms to a watcher who had already memorized every possible route she could take. Each step carried a dual narrative, one of ordinary movement and one of dangerous calculation, and the invisible observer chronicled them all with a patience born of obsession. The family, unaware of the surveillance that had begun at this moment, would later struggle to reconcile the ordinary life they knew with the nightmarish revelations that these images revealed. In the first 5 seconds, the story was already written in frames of light and shadow, a story that would unravel their sense of safety and expose the fragility of the world they thought they controlled. And as she paused momentarily to adjust the strap of her bag, she cast a glance toward a window that might have belonged to a neighbor or a friend, or even someone else entirely. And the lens recorded it all: the hesitation in her eyes, the tightness in her jaw, the small tremor in her hands that betrayed fear or anticipation, or both. In these recorded moments, the truth of a hidden life began to emerge, a truth that would be impossible to ignore once discovered, and would force the family to question how well they truly knew the person they loved. Every detail mattered, every frame told a story, and the invisible presence that had chosen to follow her with unblinking vigilance knew exactly how to turn those moments into a weapon of revelation and suspense that no one could stop. The family first sensed that something was off in subtle ways they could not immediately define. A missing detail here, a strangely timed phone call there. But they did not realize that the real disturbance was already in progress, quietly orchestrated by someone who watched without pause. In the living room that had always been a sanctuary of laughter and routine, the air now seemed heavier, almost charged, as if the space itself was aware of being invaded. The father sat at the laptop as if driven by a compulsion he could not resist, scrolling through images that he did not fully understand, but that made his heart race and palms sweat. Each frame that appeared on the screen was a frozen moment of her life, captured from angles that no one could have expected, moments so private and intimate that they seemed to exist outside the bounds of what was morally possible. The mother, sensing his tension, tried to speak, tried to break the spell of the images, but found her voice caught in the throat of uncertainty and fear, unable to articulate the creeping dread that the camera had silently delivered into their home. Every picture told a story that was both ordinary and terrifying, a normal life dissected frame by frame under the patient gaze of someone who understood how to manipulate fear. It was not merely voyeurism, it was a strategic observation, a mapping of human behavior that left the family vulnerable to insights they could not yet comprehend. Insights that would eventually expose the fragility of trust, of privacy, of the very bonds that held them together. As they watched, patterns began to emerge in the movements of the woman they thought they knew, little gestures that seemed insignificant, but carried hidden meaning to the observer who had spent countless hours analyzing each nuance. A pause at a window, a glance over the shoulder, a slight hesitation in speech that might once have been charming or coy, now appeared as signals, as cues in a larger narrative written by invisible hands. The family could feel a shift in their perception, the ordinary becoming extraordinary, mundane actions turning into harbingers of potential danger. With each passing moment, the line between reality and surveillance blurred, until even familiar corners of the home became suspect, until even the safety of the living room could not contain the tension that had silently infiltrated their lives. They began to notice subtle anomalies, objects slightly moved, shadows in angles that did not belong, and it became clear that the camera had not just recorded her life, but had begun to impose itself on theirs, reshaping their understanding of what had been real and what had been observed and manipulated. Every heartbeat, every glance, every whispered question carried the weight of the unseen eye, a presence that was patient, meticulous, and completely relentless. The family had no choice but to follow the trail laid bare in pixels and shadows, to confront a reality that was simultaneously intimate and terrifying. And in that confrontation, they discovered that the ordinary trust they had placed in each other had been silently, irrevocably compromised. It was in the quiet moments, the ones between phone calls and the ticking of clocks, that the family began to see the first signs that something far more sinister than they could imagine was at play. A neighbor who had always been friendly now lingered a little too long by the fence, offering small greetings that carried a strange edge, their eyes too focused and lingering, their movements too precise to be casual. Packages arrived at unusual hours, delivered to the porch with no signature required, and the family began to notice patterns in who came and went in the neighborhood, as if someone had rehearsed the choreography of observation and timing. Inside the home, the tension grew unbearable, a constant undercurrent that pressed on every conversation and every glance, turning even ordinary interactions into charged exchanges filled with suspicion. The father would pause mid-sentence, sensing eyes in the hall or a reflection in the window, and the mother could feel the tremor in his hands before he even realized it himself. The woman at the center of the storm had become unknowingly entangled in a web of observation, and with each passing day, her actions, casual or deliberate, were interpreted through a lens of hidden intent that the family could not yet fully comprehend, but could already feel consuming them from the inside out. The first clues were small and seemingly insignificant, but they carried an invisible weight that the family could not ignore. A light turned on in a room where no one should be. A curtain fluttered though the window was closed. A faint reflection on the television screen revealed a figure that should not have been there. Every detail was recorded and replayed in their minds, building a silent dossier of fear that tightened its grip with each discovery. The mother began keeping notes of what she observed, tracing movements, jotting down times, hoping to create some semblance of order out of chaos. But each note only confirmed that someone was always watching, always recording, and always manipulating the narrative around them. In the dead of night, she would wake to the sound of a floorboard creaking, a soft shuffle that could have been her imagination, but never was. And she would lie awake wondering how many eyes had witnessed her most vulnerable moments without her consent or knowledge. The father tried to rationalize, tried to convince them both that they were imagining the connections between unrelated events. But the evidence was too pervasive, too meticulously detailed, too impossible to ignore. By the time they confronted each other with their fears, the emotional tension had already escalated beyond simple anxiety. Trust between them frayed as they questioned not only the motives of outsiders, but the integrity of each other's recollections and perceptions. Arguments erupted over who saw what and when, over what could be safely ignored and what could not. And the woman at the center of the surveillance, still unaware of the full extent of the intrusion, began to notice a subtle shift in how she was perceived by the people closest to her. Every interaction now carried the shadow of suspicion, and every smile or gesture could no longer be taken at face value. The family realized that the camera had not just captured images, it had rewritten the rules of their life, turning the familiar into a stage for hidden threats. And with each revelation, the sense of helplessness grew, a creeping fear that no matter how carefully they moved, no matter how vigilant they became, they could never reclaim the ordinary peace that had once been theirs. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when the father stumbled across a small device hidden in the corner of the basement behind a stack of unused furniture. At first, he could not comprehend its purpose, the blinking light too subtle to draw immediate attention, the wires snaking along the floor almost as if they had grown there naturally. But when he pressed a tentative finger to the metal casing, a faint hum indicated that the device was live, recording everything. And in that instant, the magnitude of their situation became terrifyingly clear. He called the mother down, and together they examined the monitor connected to the device, and what they saw made their blood run cold. Footage of themselves moving through their home was displayed in real time, angles that should have been impossible, shots from vantage points they had never noticed, capturing intimate and private moments that were never meant for eyes beyond their own. The realization that someone had been watching them, not just once or twice, but consistently, systematically, struck with the weight of betrayal and horror that no one could have prepared them for. Every hesitation, every whispered word, every subtle gesture had been documented, stored, and potentially used against them in ways they could not yet predict. As they watched more footage, patterns began to emerge. Small details that at first seemed random now took on a sinister logic. The woman at the center of the surveillance appeared almost unaware of the scrutiny she was under, moving through the home with normal routines, yet the recordings highlighted the subtle ways in which she was being manipulated. Doors left slightly ajar, furniture subtly repositioned, lights switched on or off without explanation, and the faint presence of shadowed figures in the background created a growing sense of orchestration, as if someone had choreographed the daily life of the family for the purpose of observation and control. The emotional strain on the parents intensified as they realized that these recordings had been ongoing for weeks, perhaps months, and that every day had been infiltrated by an invisible presence that had studied their lives with obsessive attention to detail. Fear turned into paranoia as they noticed inconsistencies between what they remembered and what the footage revealed. Moments that should have been private now fully exposed. Moments that they could no longer trust even in memory. The most shocking discovery came when they noticed the presence of another person on some of the footage, a figure so fleetingly captured that it was almost imperceptible, slipping between rooms and shadows, leaving behind the smallest disturbances. A slight shift in a rug, a mug slightly moved, a curtain fluttering though the window was closed. The figure's identity remained unknown, and yet its presence conveyed an undeniable threat, a sense that their home was no longer a sanctuary, but a theater of observation where they were the unwitting performers. The mother sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the intrusion, feeling the walls close in as if the house itself had become a cage, and the father, though determined to take action, found himself paralyzed by the sheer scale of what they had uncovered. Every instinct screamed that they needed to find the person responsible, but every new piece of evidence suggested that the observer was always one step ahead, meticulous, patient, and unrelenting. They realized that the camera had done more than record their movements. It had altered the rhythm of their lives, turning every decision, every step, every glance into a potential trigger for consequences they could not yet anticipate. In that moment, the family understood that they were not just victims of a hidden eye, but participants in a larger narrative that had been carefully constructed to ensnare them, manipulate them, and ultimately expose a truth so devastating that the full implications could only be imagined and never fully known. The next revelation arrived when a neighbor, someone they had once trusted and exchanged friendly smiles with over fences and sidewalks, appeared at their door with an envelope containing images they could not have known existed without the intervention of an outside eye. The mother's hands shook as she unfolded the photos, each frame displaying angles of the woman moving through the house, sleeping, interacting with family, completely unaware of being captured. The neighbor's explanation was slow, careful, and filled with hesitation, as if they themselves were unsure whether to be friend or foe. It became clear that some of the people the family had believed to be allies were in fact instruments in a much larger operation, whether willingly or unknowingly. The neighbor admitted that they had seen the recordings, but had been coerced into remaining silent, their involvement limited to delivery and observation, and the family's trust wavered, replaced by an understanding that deception had infiltrated every layer of their life. What had once seemed normal was now a labyrinth of motives hidden behind ordinary faces, a network of observation that extended far beyond their own walls. The most shocking twist came when they traced the source of the recordings to a location that defied all logic in the neighborhood. A small, abandoned storefront, its windows boarded and paint peeling, appeared utterly innocuous from the street. Yet inside, they discovered a fully operational command center filled with monitors, recording equipment, and maps detailing the family's movements, routines, and interactions. It became painfully clear that the surveillance was not random, but orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of their daily habits, someone who had anticipated their reactions and manipulated circumstances to ensure maximum exposure and psychological pressure. Every clue, every seemingly accidental encounter, and every subtle observation had been designed to provoke fear, mistrust, and dependency, turning their lives into a living experiment where nothing was accidental and everything carried purpose. The emotional toll on the family intensified as they realized the scale of the operation and the motives behind it remained obscured. Was this an act of personal vendetta, a calculated power play, or part of a larger network whose interests intersected with their lives in ways they could not yet comprehend? Every possibility seemed darker than the last, and with each revelation, the family began to question not only the intentions of those around them, but their own ability to discern reality from manipulation. The father could barely look his neighbors in the eye. The mother found herself questioning every sound and shadow, and the woman at the center of the surveillance began to internalize a growing paranoia that her every choice, every interaction, was being dissected by someone invisible yet omnipresent. As night fell over the city, the glow of the monitors in the abandoned storefront seemed to mock them, reflecting not only their movements, but the fragility of their trust and the impossibility of returning to life as it had been. They understood that uncovering the location of the surveillance was only the beginning, that the real challenge lay in deciphering the motives behind it and confronting the forces that had silently, meticulously, and unrelentingly invaded their lives. The confrontation began almost imperceptibly, a tension that had been building for weeks now erupting in sudden, urgent motion. The family, driven by a combination of fear, desperation, and the need to reclaim control, decided to trace the source of the recordings to the abandoned storefront once again, determined to confront whoever was orchestrating the surveillance. Every step they took through the rain-slicked streets was shadowed by uncertainty, each corner a potential trap, each figure in the mist a possible enemy. The woman at the center, now painfully aware of the unseen eyes that had monitored her, moved with calculated caution, aware that any misstep could trigger an unpredictable. The storm outside had exhausted itself by the time they reached the safe house, but inside, the tension only intensified. The room felt too small for the truth that had been following them, pressing in from all sides, tightening its hold with each passing minute. The woman at the center of the ordeal sat silently at the metal table, her breathing calm but shallow, as if she had finally accepted something the others were still desperately trying to understand. The parents stood opposite her, drenched in rain and fear, waiting for the explanation that would either free them or destroy everything they believed about their family. The lamp above hummed softly, the only sound in a room that seemed to have been built to keep secrets contained. On the table lay the thick file they had recovered from the abandoned surveillance command center. Its contents spread like fragments of a shattered life. Photographs of her walking down streets they recognized, sitting in rooms they thought were private, standing in places they could not identify. Maps tracking her movements with precision. Notes scribbled in a hand none of them recognized, outlining behaviors, patterns, deviations, with a coldness that made their skin crawl. For a long moment, no one spoke. The family had asked questions all night, yet every answer seemed incomplete. They wanted clarity, closure, understanding. But now, facing her, they sensed that the truth was too complex to rush, too heavy to speak lightly. She lifted her eyes slowly, and the look in them held a depth of exhaustion that none of the recordings had captured. It was the gaze of someone who had carried a burden long before the cameras ever appeared. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but unwavering. She explained that the surveillance hadn't begun in this neighborhood. It hadn't started with the cameras hidden in their home. It hadn't even started with the unknown figure slipping through the shadows. It began years earlier, before they ever knew her, before she had become part of their family, when she had witnessed something she was never meant to see. A transaction, a betrayal, a secret powerful enough to make her a target for people who did not forget, people who did not stop watching once they started. The family stared in disbelief as she recounted the events that had set her life on a collision course with the surveillance they had uncovered. She had been monitored ever since, not for what she was doing in the present, but for what she had seen in the past. Someone believed she still held evidence that could unravel their entire operation. She admitted she didn't know who exactly was behind it, whether it was a private entity, a criminal faction, or someone she had once trusted. But she knew they wanted control, and that control required knowing every step she took. The parents listened in stunned silence as she revealed that she had tried to outrun them for years, moving cities, changing routines, cutting ties. But the watchers always found her, infiltrating her life through neighbors, strangers, delivery workers, cameras disguised in mundane objects, familiar faces turned into unwilling informants. She had hoped that by staying quiet, laying low, and avoiding confrontation, she might eventually slip out of their focus. But the surveillance never stopped. It only became more elaborate, more personal, more suffocating. The discovery in the basement, the footage on the monitors, the abandoned storefront, they weren't new operations. They were just the latest iteration of a hunt that had been tightening its grip long before the family realized anything was wrong. And now, by pulling away the curtain, by confronting the shadows, they had stepped directly into the center of the storm she had spent years trying to escape. The father ran a trembling hand through his hair, trying to process the impossible weight of her confession. The mother felt her knees weaken as she realized they had been living inside someone else's pursuit, unknowingly participating in a war they never signed up for. The room felt colder, the air thinner, as if the truth itself had drained the warmth from the walls. But the woman wasn't finished. The final blow came when she slid a small, worn flash drive across the table. The metal was scratched, the casing cracked, but the significance of it was unmistakable. This, she said quietly, was what they were after. Not her, not them, not the house or the neighborhood. This single piece of evidence held the key to a truth powerful enough to topple the people who had orchestrated the surveillance, the manipulation, the fear. She had kept it hidden for years, waiting for the right moment to decide whether to expose it or destroy it. And now, with her family entangled in the consequences of her past, she no longer had the luxury of indecision. It was time to make a choice. The mother reached for the drive with trembling fingers, but the woman pulled it back slightly, her voice steady as she said one final thing. If we open this, everything changes. Our lives won't ever go back to normal. And if we destroy it, we may never know why they won't stop. The father swallowed hard, the weight of the decision pressing into his chest like a physical force. The mother's eyes darted to the security camera blinking in the corner, sensing that even here, they were not alone. The woman at the center of it all folded her hands calmly, waiting. Outside, the storm clouds began to clear. Inside, the family faced a truth they could no longer outrun, and as the lamp flickered overhead, the camera quietly recorded every second, just as it always had. If you think you know what's on the flash drive, or who has been watching the family all this time, comment below with your theory and don't hold back. Your idea could be closer to the truth than you think. Make sure to like this video if the tension kept you on the edge of your seat, and subscribe so you don't miss the shocking continuation of this story. Hit the notification bell because the next chapter will reveal secrets that will change everything you thought you knew about who is really pulling the strings.